Welcome to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, bringing baby boomers proven strategies and innovative products for getting fit, staying fit, so you can live a longer, healthier, and happier life. Here's your host, best-selling author and fitness advocate, Phil Ferris.
This is Phil Ferris, and welcome to our show. Never Too Late for Fitness Radio provides answers and straight talk about fitness, nutrition, healthy lifestyles for people over 50. Our goal is to educate and advocate health and fitness strategies that help you live a longer, healthier, and happier life. On some shows, we focus on organizations and industry professionals who share how they help their clients who are 50 plus achieve their health and fitness goals. On other shows like today, we feature everyday people who have conquered the challenges of aging and have created a path for others to follow. We all love a success story because they inform, motivate, and inspire us to live a healthier life. My guest today is someone I'm very excited to talk to because he's a great example of why it's never too late for fitness. Dave Van Til has been a full-time mediator and arbitrator for over 35 years, both as a private mediator and as a member of the Superior Arbitration and Mediation panels, and is widely accepted by both the plaintiff and defense bars. Prior to becoming a full-time mediator arbitrator, Dave practiced law in San Diego, representing both plaintiffs and defendants. He's a lifelong fitness advocate, and he's used his passion for fitness to fuel his primary hobby of training the older body. When approaching 60, he decided to become a competitive bodybuilder and competed in several local, state, national, and international competitions. In 2013, he competed in the Muscle Beach Championships in Venice Beach, California, and came in first in the over 60 class. In 2014, he competed in the NPC National Masters Bodybuilding competition and placed second in his division. He also holds a black belt from the American Kickboxing Federation. His current workouts now are a fusion of weight training and martial arts to continue to improve his strength, flexibility, and balance. Thank you for being here today, Dave.
Thank you, Phil. I'm flattered to be invited.
Great. Well, you've led a very active life where you've been involved in sports and working out. Maybe you can share a little bit about your background in fitness and how your fitness strategies have kind of evolved over the years.
Well, I'll try to make this relatively brief, but starting in the mid-50s when I was a teenager, I hung out the YMCA in Paterson, New Jersey, and just happened to walk into a weight room, and I saw these guys with the powder and everything else, and I was always very impressed. Through college, I started lifting weights and wrestling, and then all through law school, I would play basketball, but I'd always come back to do a little weights. And in my 40s, I got involved in triathlons. I did that for about 10 years, but always a little bit with the weights. In my 50s, I got into kickboxing, did that for, I still do it. To the point where I got a black belt. Then late 50s, early 60s, I got more serious about weight training and bodybuilding and got into it from there.
Well, that's great.
And continued to this day. And
it's interesting that it's kind of interesting because I played basketball until I was 65. I did triathlons in my 30s and 40s. So very similar kinds of thing. Finding ways to compete was always something that I found, and I had to adjust it based on my time and also what my body could handle. One of the things you mentioned on your website is you talk about how the older body needs different approaches each decade. So it'd be helpful if you could say, when did you first notice changes in your body that required you to change your approach to fitness? And what were those specific things that you noticed, and how did it make you change?
Well, I think as I got in my 40s, I started noticing that I wasn't recovering quite as rapidly, and my strength was not gaining. In fact, it was losing a little bit. So I started doing a little investigation and really started learning about hormones, and happened to run into somebody that was a naturopathic doctor, had a lot of discussions and did some testing. And realize that at that point, you're particularly males, the testosterone changes a little bit, estrogen. So I made a point of nutritionally and supplements without getting into detail to address that issue, and I really noticed a difference. When as you all know out there, you have natural muscle wasting as you age, and I found that more when I was in 50s. So I started really getting more into understanding nutrition and how the intestines and so forth work, so that I could slow down the muscle wasting. In fact, actually sort of reverse it, if you will. So that's sort of what I've noticed over the years, and that continues on to this day. So I monitor hormones for one thing. Diet is probably 80% of it, and then of course the right exercises.
Okay. Now, what are some of the specific nutritional things that you zeroed in on that helped you to reverse the loss of muscle mass?
Well, I, like everybody else into this, I got all into the hype of protein and protein powders and so forth, and until I realized, yes, you need a certain amount of amino acids, a certain amount of protein, but it's more the right combination of the macronutrients, like your enough carbohydrates, but not too much. Fat isn't all bad. So, you have to learn your own body, but through some reasonable experimentation, you don't have to go to extremes. You can enjoy life, but there's some little changes in that will make a huge difference in your body composition.
Okay. All right. And kind of referred to it just a minute ago. You said that until the older body has its intestines and hormones in proper order, much of the cardio and weight training time is wasted. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how our body changes and what we can actually do about it to prevent those problems?
Well, I'm not a physician, and understand I'm talking this medical stuff. This is from a layman's perspective and what I've learned about my own body. But from the intestines, I made sure that things were working, if you will, correctly, so that what I do eat is properly absorbed and utilized. And because if that doesn't happen, you don't gain the muscle, you don't feed the muscles, you store it as fat. So that's what I mean by the intestines. There's a lot of ways you can do that. Anybody can just take a look or talk to their doctor. I hate to be so crude, but how do I be regular so that my body, when it gets food, can utilize it most effectively?
Okay. And there's a saying I once heard that says, it's not what you eat that counts, it's what your body absorbs.
Exactly.
And, if you don't
you said it more succinctly than what I was trying to say. Exactly.
But we assume that just because we eat something that we're going to get the full benefits from it, and that's not necessarily true, because how our body assimilates it, what our digestive tract does. It also can be in terms of what the makeup. A lot of times they'll look on a product and it says this much protein, this much vitamins, but those might not be good proteins. They may not be good vitamins that our body can assimilate and utilize. So as I've been told before, that we have very expensive urine sometimes when we take all those supplements that don't get absorbed, and then we don't get the results. So, and that does become more important as we age, because, a lot of things happen in our digestive system that we lose some of the digestive systems to break down foods, and some of the enzymes that we need. So those are things that, again, working with a healthcare provider, probably a good idea, just to make sure, am I absorbing, how effectively am I absorbing what I'm eating? Now, in your 60s, you decided to become a competitive bodybuilder. Now, as we talked about, for some people, running around the stage in Speedos in front of hundreds of people is not necessarily something on their bucket list. So what motivated you to become a competitive bodybuilder?
Well, I don't know if your audience is familiar with Frank Zane. Anybody that's been around bodybuilding will, and I know you know who he is. Yep. He lives in San Diego, and I happened to run into him. I actually looked him up, but then we became, I was a client of his for a while. We became friends. I started working out with him, and he encouraged me to enter a local bodybuilding competition, which I'd never thought about before. In fact, he gave me one of his original Speedos that I used for my first competition in San Diego. And I just turned 60, and The good news was I was the only competitor, so I got first place. But I became addicted by the whole, actually, to be honest with you, it was the preparation, not so much the competition, but having goal-oriented towards the competition. But most importantly, because I felt good about it mentally, it was more so than the body.
Can you tell us a little bit about, you talk about the preparation part of it. Can you get specifics about some of the things you did from a training and nutrition standpoint as a bodybuilder to get that, that feeling of well-being from bodybuilding?
Well, my whole philosophy with anybody, especially at this age, looking good, as you indicated before, is probably just one part of it. I'm more interested in how I feel mood-wise, just physically. But when you get ready for a bodybuilding competition, you're looking in the mirror all the time, which is, somewhat egotistical, but you're gearing towards lowering your body fat in a reasonable manner. And that, of course, entails 90% diet and 10% training. I don't know if that answers your question. I sort of went circuitous there, but.
All right. So what would a typical nutritional plan be for a day?
Well, I would do the protein would be number one, but it would be in moderation, not grams and grams of it, but little by little lowering carbohydrates. And then I don't know if you're familiar or your audience is familiar with cycling. I would go 2 or 3 days with minimal carbohydrates, then load up. That gets a little bit complex, but that regulates the water in your system, so it just makes you look differently. But as far as the feeling good goes, it's maintain that day-to-day reasonable diet with reasonable protein and not too much carbohydrates and good fats.
Okay. And the key in bodybuilding is look at your body as like a canvas that you can kind of create a different look to it based on the nutritional input that you have by reducing fat, reducing water retention, especially in the day of the competition. And then the other is the building muscle. Now, a lot of times people have, don't really understand the difference between bodybuilding, strength training, working out, CrossFit. So there's a lot of different things out there that involve strength training and getting stronger, building muscle. Can you describe a little bit about what bodybuilding is and how that workout is perhaps different than what you'll typically see people do in the gym?
Well, the primary difference with bodybuilding is obviously you're not so much geared towards strength or functionality other than appearance. And that usually involves pumping blood into the muscle and getting what we refer to as the pump. Without getting into too much detail, that's increasing the sarcoplasm in the muscle. But when you get into strength training, and that's what I do now, I mix it up between bodybuilding, strength training, flexibility, which I think any older person should concentrate on rather than just one or the other.
Okay. Any other, in terms of the amount of reps you do or the amount of time you spend in a workout, how is that, how long was a typical bodybuilding routine versus let's say a strength routine that you may do?
Well, I can tell you what mine is now. I'm approaching 75. I think I may be competing again this year. I haven't decided yet, but I probably will. But my workouts are very rarely more than 30 minutes. I get down, I'm very high repetitions. I'm into something relatively new now, blood flow restriction training, which you can look up. But it's real high intensity, short duration, the old HIIT.
Right.
But I use, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But that's what it is. My cardio training consists, quite frankly, mostly just walking some in the evening, and I do some Tabata. If your audience is familiar with that, T-A-B-A-T-A, it's high intensity training on a bicycle. But that's about 10 minutes at a training session, and that seems to work for me. as far as keeping my muscle mass up and feeling good and not being overtrained, which is key.
Yeah, now, it's interesting that, a lot of people think that if I'm going to compete in a bodybuilding competition, or if I'm going to really get stronger, I'm going to have to spend hours and hours and hours in the gym. Yet that's not necessarily the case. As you've talked about, 30 minutes of weight training. How many times a week do you do that?
I probably now, if I'm doing real high repetitions, I'll do it 2 to 3 times a week. At most, and then I add a little bit of the high intensity cardio that I talked about to the bottom, but that's a 10-15 minute workout, and then some walking, which is good for the body and for the brain.
Yeah,
but you don't need to spend hours beyond 30 minutes. If you're doing it hard, it's counterproductive because you're just tearing down your muscle you can't repair, especially as you get older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, after about 45 minutes, your body loses the ability to produce the human growth hormone, which is the whole benefit to recover. And so, like I said, you're breaking it down too much.
That's exactly it, Phil. When you're doing the first part, you're stimulating your growth hormone. But as you said, when you get beyond that, you're doing just the converse, and you're tearing down, and your body, especially as you get older, can't recuperate, and it's actually counterproductive.
And when you pick up the intensity, how does that affect your off days? What do you do in your off days to encourage recovery?
As I mentioned before, walking, and I'm sort of into cold therapy. Cold showers or cryotherapy. I do that a little bit, but just active recovery. And when I say active, that means walking primarily.
Okay, and that kind of is consistent with what most doctors and health experts say: is this moving every day. Movement is great for your body, whether you have arthritis or have any other thing. Movement is good for your body. The more you move, the better you feel. The better you feel, the more you move. And then doing the intense workouts minimize the amount of time you spend doing other things, as long as you give your body that chance to recover. So you're moving every day. You're working out 2-3 times with weight training and some high intensity interval aerobic or cardio. Now, is your approach to training, do you have to be a bodybuilder or a kickboxer in order to get the benefits that you're getting? Or is that something?
Oh, not at all. No, not at all. And I only do this as a hobby, is to help older people, men and women. And I live in a high rise in San Diego. And I'll give you an example. There's she's going to be 90 in next month, but in the mid-80s, I met her and just had a conversation with her about talking her walk straight. And she got interested in it. I took her to the gym, and a couple years later, she was doing as much as 5 pull-ups, and she just kept getting stronger and stronger. But her workouts were 20, 30 minutes twice a week. So you're never too old to get into it, and you certainly don't need to do kickboxing and bodybuilding. You need to do some resistance, and you need to do the things I talked about before, walking and maybe a little bit cardio, whether that's walking up the stairs or something to get your heart rate up. Okay.
Now, I'm sure there's people out there that are thinking, I can't do what Dave's done because he's been doing this all his life. What advice would you give to those people that are thinking they're a little intimidated to get into a fitness regimen that haven't?
Yeah. Well, first of all, obviously it's never too late. The example I gave you a few minutes ago with my friend, the lady in the 80s, but at any age, as long as you start moving, you start modifying your diet a little bit. And here again, you got to enjoy life. I'm not talking about living like a ascetic of some sort, but you can reverse or at least slow down the natural muscle wasting with not that much effort, as long as you do it right. If you get somebody that is not trying to sell you a bill of goods, but trying to get you to move and do the proper movements, you can gain it at any age.
Okay. And the concept of the high intensity interval training, that sounds real intimidating to people. would you recommend people do, as they get 50, 60, 70 to do high intensity interval training? And if they do,
oh yes,
what suggestion would you give them?
Well, anybody just to look up the concept of Tabata, T-A-B-A-T-A. There's all kinds of information on the internet and how to do it. You can get on a stationary bike, and in 10 minutes you can have the same workout as doing 40 minutes of jogging. It's safe, it's easy on the joints, and it's not time consuming. I have friends that are doing it, one in the 80s, and it's very easy and anything but intimidating.
Okay, and because it is short, but it is intense, but I think that some of the misconception people have is I have to go as intense as somebody else, as opposed to as intense as I can go. Because when you talk about high intensity interval, it's pushing it as hard as you can for whether it be 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever interval you have there, then recover, and then push it again, and it's relative to your intensity level. And so,
exactly. So you said it right there. You're not competing against anybody in any of the stuff that you do other than yourself, and to make yourself look better and feel better, and mostly feel better.
And most people will. They'll say, wow, I pushed it today. And that sense of, I can see where I'm pushing it more than I did before. And then when people feel the difference, they want to do it again. They start getting that I call the addiction of working out because they feel better. Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier on, in addition to your strength and cardio, you focus on your flexibility and balance. And you said that becomes more important as we age. What do you do to maintain or improve your flexibility and balance?
Well, as far as balance goes, I just have basic exercise, and that becomes really critical as we age, because as you know, that's the number one problem with aging people is they lose their balance, they fall, they break their hip, and that's the end of them for any functional purposes. So, as simple as standing on one leg for, increasing your time by 10 seconds a day. And then everybody knows about stretching. You can get any type of stretching magazine, but it's as long as you're moving those joints and keeping them active and beyond what they're normally doing, you're going to keep your flexibility also, and minimize any arthritis and joint problems, at least to the extent that you're able to.
And if you do have joint pain from arthritis, movement, minimizes and considerably. I have arthritis in my knees, and I play tennis. And if I do a proper warm up, they don't bother me. And if I do a proper stretching afterwards, I don't feel bad afterwards. And like you mentioned, cold showers or ice is also good for aching muscles and aching joints. Dave, if someone's over 50 and they haven't been working out for a while and they're thinking about starting a fitness program, what would be the best recommendations you give them so that they would have success in their fitness journey?
Well, it depends on what their access to facilities, but I would start out with walking, and just even if you're going to start climbing steps, so you get the feel of getting the heart rate up. But if you got a chance to get with weights and either machines or free weights, either at the local Y or professional gym, get into somebody that'll teach you real high repetition work, because that's what's going to get the blood into those muscles and joints and ease those pains, as opposed to trying to lift real heavy weights. And you'll stimulate the muscle just as much if you put the proper effort into it. Okay.
I think that's great advice. I think it's important that whatever you do, use proper form. Don't use more weight than you need to. It's about stimulating the muscles with the weight you have, and then the other part would be, I guess, do it regularly. Make it a habit. It's the habit of fitness. And when you get into the habit, it's a lot easier and you don't think about it because it's something like brushing your teeth or eating breakfast. It's just something you do.
Well, and particularly as you mentioned earlier, that if you do it and you start getting, the endorphins, you start feeling good, the oxygen gets to your brain. It's almost like a narcotic. It makes you want to come back for more. Quite frankly, that's the main reason I work out is because I always feel better. And, the looking better is obviously a perk from it, but it's more about at this age is how good do I feel and how good do I function. And that's what you'll find if you get into it and you start getting that blood flowing, it'll become addictive.
Well, thanks. Well, David, I want to thank you for sharing your insights, being a great example of someone who has been physical all their life, but adjusted and continues to compete. I wish you great luck in your pursuit of your next bodybuilding championship. And so I want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Phil.
All right. You have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, hosted by Phil Ferris. To learn more about the guests or resources on our show today, or to listen to past episodes, go to nevertoolateforfitness.com.